Chapter 12 is the foundations of critical thinking, because we talked a lot about previously. Critical thinkers are open-minded. They're, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. They have sort of a thought process where they reason out things like a cost benefit analysis, and you don't make involuntary decisions where you just react and do and sort of voluntarily making a decision. And you're doing it great about taking in knowledge so you can make an informed decision. So let's really talk about the foundations here, and this will wrap up the textbook. So let's talk about defining intelligence. We actually did that earlier. We talked about a little bit about emotional intelligence. But what do you think are the traits of an intelligent person, for example, or even an intelligent animal? So problem solving and practical skills, right? So when a rat can solve a maze to get to the cheese, right? You're like, oh, that's showing some intelligence, because some creatures, they cannot do that at all, right? Or you see actually human beings solving complex problems. And then you're like, oh, wow, that person did a great job of designing this neighborhood. And that's a great, problem solving skill. And you think that person is intelligent, and then they might even get paid more for that, or the reputation is enhanced. And then practical skills, of course, are just when people can do things like build a house, fix a car. In the wintertime, we had a lot of people fixing snow blowers, right? And that's a very practical skill. And you feel like, gosh, if someone has the ability to do that and have a machine break on you, but then you can fix it yourself, that's a pretty practical skill, right? So that is also considered a trait of intelligence. Verbal ability, yeah, how people publicly express themselves in speaking and argumentation is also a defining trait of intelligence. I have been told by other people many, many times, you're smart. And I think one of the reasons that you get that feedback is because you have an ability to verbally express yourself, right? Which is maybe why that's a good attribute that makes me an effective professor or instructor for this class, right? So the way you articulate yourself can really go a long way. And if you don't say anything, that speaks volumes too, right? When you're in a meeting or in a group of people or around work situation, for example. So having great verbal ability. And we talked a lot about how status matters and reflects that, right? Power has an influence on that as well. All right, then third is social competence. So this is your ability to navigate the social world, right? So I know some very intelligent people, but they're very awkward socially. So you see that, like, okay, you're very book smart, but you lack your ability to just relate to other human beings, right? And I think that, again, even if you're like introverted on the personality scale or have some other things that maybe make it's harder to develop your social skills. Like any skill, if you put the time and effort into it, you get better at it, right? So just how to manage, a party, how to manage a work, cooler discussion, how to be socially competent around children, right? Because I know a lot of people, they constantly swear around children. You're like, yo, that's not cool. And they're like, they apologize. And then 3 seconds later, it's like another F-bomb, right? So I think that's just a good example of some social competence as well, just really understanding how to fit in all the different situations. And then Howard Gardner of Harvard has proposed a theory of multiple intelligences. So Dr. Gardner argues that there are actually 8 different kinds of intelligence. So there's not just, again, just, you are intelligent and you are not. There's actually lots of different types of them. So linguistic intelligence or verbal communication, we talked a lot about that as well, right? So your ability to use a language, and then reflects on intelligence, and then also your ability to verbally express yourself, right? So good leaders have to be able to verbally express themselves, for example. So logical and mathematical intelligence is also ability to solve mathematical problems. I think anybody, Albert Einstein was good at math, for example, Dr. Carl Sagan. Also, there was the guy who died with the robot voice, Stephen Hawking, all super great at math, and definitely shows big people that you have an awesome ability in terms of intelligence in your brain. So spatial intelligence is the ability to perceive the world accurately. That's your surroundings and awareness. I know a lot of people who are very ignorant of what's immediately around them, right? If you're like a police officer or like a military person, your spatial intelligence has usually been very enhanced because you're trying to survive in an environment where you better make sure you perceive the world accurately, because who's the enemy, what could be an ambush, what could be like roadside bomb, and that's a great example of that. Or if you're a gang member, if you want to like, cruise around the opposite territory, your spatial intelligence skills will really help you navigate that, right? Because you won't like blunder ignorantly into a situation that'll get you into big trouble. All right, so musical, and this, I think, by the way, if you ever like try to chase someone through the crowd or follow them, like you're a friend, I mean, like you're trying to stick together and you're at a big concert festival, I think spatial intelligence is kind of that ability to sort of orient yourself and stay together because you're just perceiving the world pretty accurately, right? Like again, with the space around you. We don't spell spatial with a C, like outer space, inner space, if it's T, so just spatial intelligence, okay? Another good example that might be when I walk into a restaurant, I always sit somewhere with my children where like we can get to an exit and kind of I can watch who comes in if there's something crazy that might happen, right? Because I think today's world, you got to be a little bit vigilant when you're out in public. And then so musical intelligence is the ability to perceive and create musical information. Mozart, Beethoven, anybody. But by the way, I think which is why you should learn music and play some musical instruments, because musical intelligence is, for example, Dr. Gardner's one of his 8 intelligence fields, right? So being able to create it as well, I think is songwriting to mixing it, on SoundCloud, I think shows some musical intelligence. DJs become really popular for that reason. Body kinesthetic intelligence is the control of body motion and ability to handle objects, right? Like a surgeon, take a scalpel, make a precise cut, not shake, get scared, get nervous. Athletes probably have very, very awesome dimensions of body kinesthetic intelligence, right? They just control their body motion, ability to handle objects. Dancers would be another example of that, right? And you see anybody who's perfected that skill to that degree, you consider them intelligent in that from that dimensional perspective. And then intrapersonal intelligence, intra meaning within, inter meaning across or between. So is the ability to know one's own feelings. Yeah, I'm jealous, or I'm mad and upset, or I feel excited. And maybe you're playing poker, so usually you're not put your poker face on. So it's exploring your inner thoughts, your inner child, your inner feelings, and having a grasp over that. Because we talked a lot about feelings are emotional. We talked a lot about earlier logic and emotion kind of go to conflict with each other a lot. What is the logical part of your brain saying to making this decision, and what is your reactive, or maybe your emotional, or the feelings push you, your impulse tell you to do what you do. So and then interpersonal intelligence, so cross people, so other people, reading other people, is the ability to understand other people's feelings and motives and to communicate that understanding, right? So like I really understand how you feel, which is why people can relate to each other, and then they have empathy, right? And that can create friendships. So if you have people who are going to have social skills, their interpersonal intelligence is really pretty high, right? And then we have naturalist intelligence. That's the ability to understand the natural world, kind of connects to spatial intelligence if you're not in like a human environment with buildings and concrete everywhere, but you're more in the natural world. And that's the ability to sort of describe and categorize characteristics of plants and animals. I know what the deciduous trees are. I can recognize a lot of the pine trees around here in the Tahoe Basin, and they're different, and they have different traits. And also you learn a lot about all the different animals. I found like every once in a while, I found a dead rabbit and has no head. And that means it's a hawk or an owl that got it. And then I usually, because the reason I find them is because my dogs start, scoop it up and start playing with it, the dead rabbit fur. And the rabbit fur is, because it's a winter coat, I've never found them in the summer. It's more been in the winter time. And it's really amazing. You realize how they survive the winter. Their coat is super thick, like it's, winterproof type stuff. So, and so forth, and one of the, a lot of psychological theories now have been talking about how human beings are sort of been cut off from the natural world, and that's caused some schism in who we are and maybe in our happiness and our mental health, and that going to experience nature is has great therapeutic value. And so I know inner city kids who've never actually been to the mountains or seen evergreen trees, right? They've only seen like what's in LA or San Diego. And it's kind of amazing that you realize some people don't have the ability to always do that. So getting everyone out there, I think it would be healthy for everybody, by the way. And if something you want to pick up a trait that's good for you, make sure you're explore the natural world. Find out a way to go do something in nature. And I think you'll be really, really happy about that over the course of your lifetime. And it'll create that field of dimension of intelligence. So, all right. So Robert Sternberg also argues that we don't possess just one type of intelligence. Again, he's in the same school, that we have multiple types of intelligence. And he states actually we possess 3 types of intelligence. He calls that the triarchic theory of intelligence, right? Tri meaning 3. So analytical intelligence, creative intelligence, and then practical intelligence. So again, all this relates to critical thinking in terms of what kind of critical thinker you might be, depending on the basis of your foundations of your intelligence. So, whether it's the 8 dimensions or the Sternberg's triarch. So number 1 is, again, analytical intelligence. This is where we have an internal knowledge of the type learned in formal education, like college and upper high school, and displaying the ability of the human to critically think and problem solve. Yeah. So life is full of problem solving. Your car breaks down, you get sick and you can't go to this work meeting or this class. Like you have financial problems, you can have like relationship problems with family, with your girlfriend or boyfriend, with other friends, creating drama in your life, or maybe you're creating drama in their life. That's happened to me. I've created drama in my friends' lives on accident. Again, you learn this mostly through formal education. So that's instructor with, like a class, an evaluation method. And then you learn the critical thinking and problem solving skills. And that's analytical intelligence, right? Analyzing is done with your brain. So then we have creative intelligence. And a lot of people say your brain is divided into hemispheres, left and right. And then the creative side is generally on one side or the other. I forget which side it's on, sorry. And then involves insight, synthesis, and the ability to react to novel stimuli and situations. So insight is like having some perspective or the ability to really, really look at something, and that people don't always look at it that way, maybe even outside the box thinking. It's good to be insightful, by the way. I believe that's true. If you're going to be like a TV announcer, right, and do live broadcasting, you have the ability often to be insightful from what you see and right in front of you at the game. For example, on sports announcing, and you're able to make commentary that everyone says is relevant and entertaining and fun or knowledgeable. And synthesis is joining things together. So this is the ability to maybe do fusion of food. Thai food is a great example of that. If you didn't know, Thai food is basically Vietnamese, Chinese, Asian food mixed with Indian food. And that's why you have this interesting with curry but it's different with the milk because they do, Indian curry is different from the Thai curry and the noodles and all these other things. So, so joining anything, creating synthesis means join. So that is great. When you work with people, you have a lot of synergy, because you work together, right? Or you have a lot of synthesis because 2 people can do a lot more than just one person. If you ever try to move a couch, right? One person, it's really, really hard, but 2 people can really move it around, right? And the ability to react to novel stimuli, because novel means new, or you just haven't experienced before, right? And these could be, again, things that you're able to sort of just react to again, right? So, and reaction is, again, involuntary. Right, but that's because your reactions to this new situation, your creative intelligence allows you to handle and deal with it pretty well, right? So, yeah. All right, the type reflects how an individual connects the internal world to the external reality. Right, we talked a lot about how external reality is kind of how everyone perceives it, and they're all kind of different, which is why we can say the world is illusory. But you see how the ability to connect your internal world to external reality, and other people see that, they're like, wow, you're very intelligent. And then third, we have practical intelligence, street smarts. So it involves the ability to grasp, understand, and solve real life problems in the everyday jungle of life. Right, you give people tips and hacks about how to manage traffic, how to rack up points on your credit card without racking up credit card debt. Could be little things about how to use coupons, how to get a good parking spot, and you see some, that very practical meanings that you can use it every day. Practical intelligence is really awesome, and you want people to help you navigate the world who have this ability for practical intelligence, by the way, too, right? So, and this reflects how individuals relate to the external world about him or her. I didn't like that. I usually fix that, the pronoun. So anyhow, them. And in short, practical intelligence is street smarts, right? So yeah, you people who understand what could be a scam, what could be a vulnerable situation, you shouldn't go there. What could be actually a great opportunity, legitimate opportunity, right? So Yeah, practical intelligence. Go out there. I think you gain that by going out there in the world. I think you want to go out with friends so you have some protection and there's safety in numbers. And try and work on your practical intelligence skills, right? Like, what do you do when like a homeless person comes up and starts talking to you, right? I be respectful, but I generally, one of the things I never do is I never stop. I just keep walking, right? Because you're going somewhere and they're asking you for something. So I just politely talk to them and respectful. I don't ignore them ever, but I never stop walking, right? It's actually one of the good security measure that whenever you're talking to people who are strangers that you don't know who they really are, you never stop walking in the situation when they come up to you, right? You just keep on trying to go where you are, but you be polite and acknowledge them. All right, so let's talk about measuring intelligence. This is page 233, chapter 12. So a lot of people are familiar with the intelligence quotient, or IQ. It comes from the Stanford-Binet test, and then about 90 to 110 is a normal average IQ score. You can take the test. They do it in middle school is when I took the test. And I remember one question from it, actually. It was, I have some paper here, so I'm going to find something that I can fold up really easily here. And it was something like, if you fold it once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can't fold it anymore. 6 times. How many squares or rectangles would you get? And if you unfold it, you can kind of see all the creases. If we count them out, I have no idea anymore. I actually have to think about this. I just made this question up. But I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 on this side and 12 on this. So 12 times 12 is 144, right? I remember that was like one of the IQ questions. Okay. So ingenious levels like in the 120 range. If you're actually like diagnosed mentally retarded, I believe that's like below 70 or 60. I'm sorry, yeah, won't quote me, but it's been a while since I looked at. But the reason I don't pay attention anymore is a lot of people say that is not a good measure of intelligence. That actually Sternberg or sorry, I forgot his name. Gardner, these theories of intelligence with emotional intelligence built onto all of that is much, much more interesting and correct than the IQ test, just because that's everyone, that's just a lot of people rely on that for a long time. Okay, so aptitude tests such as the ACT, SAT, ASVAB, etc., are also used to measure intelligence. These are heavily criticized, but it is a measure of some sort, like better than nothing. These are taken in high school, ACT achievement tests, scholastic aptitude tests. ASVAB is like your armed services vocational aptitude and battery test, I believe, that you take in high school. And that's the test you take when you join the military, and they kind of figure out what you should do in the military based on your ASVAB score. Okay, and then there's a Wechsler intelligence scale, and this measures adult intelligence only, and so not children, because I told you the IQ test I actually took in middle school, so you're talking about developing teenagers, as opposed to this is only focused on adults. And then Sternberg's multi-dimensional abilities test, and we talked about that over here with analytical intelligence, creative intelligence, and practical intelligence, right? So then let's talk about emotional intelligence, page 234, 235. So, and I work on, because I have children, my emotional intelligence every day of my life, where you try to make intelligent decisions about what your emotions do to you and the behavior that it creates in you, right? So I was watching a little bit of Stranger Things on Netflix. I'm only into season 2, very beginning of it, but there's a scene where the new character, the girl, her name's Max, is being driven by, I haven't figured out, like it's not her brother, but they're somehow together there. He's kind of a punk high school teenager, and he yells at her, grabs her in a way that kind of, it bothered me. And I was thinking, like, that's somebody who's not emotionally intelligent, when you get kind of like violent in the way that you talk to people or react to certain situations. So Yale psychologist Peter Salovey and the University of New Hampshire's John Mayer, they actually describe qualities like understanding your own feelings and having empathy for the feelings of others. Like empathy is basically, it's much better than sympathy. Empathy, again, is you literally feel that person's pain because you've been there before. So if you've experienced the exact same experience they have, that creates empathy. So you know what it's like to walk in their shoes. Sympathy is we're like, I've never done that, but it sounds terrible. I feel sad for you because you're maybe like your brother or sister died in a gun violence, all right? And you'd be like trying to support your friend, but because you've never been through that, you cannot empathize with them. You can only sympathize with them. So empathy is when you really understand their feelings, and then you can respect them. And the regulation of emotion in a way that enhances living, right? So you regulate, control your emotions that enhances your life and how you are in a store, public setting, in a restaurant, how you drive, how you interact with your friends, your family. So I would say people who engage in domestic violence, they all are poor in the emotional intelligence level scale, right? That's a way to understand that. And then people who are very calm, cool, and collected, even in very chaotic situations that could create a lot of different emotions to happen. You would say that their emotional intelligence is very high. And I think that's a really good way. So don't even think of it as an intelligence. I think it's just like people who are like can control your emotions and make good, smart decisions. Right. So, and you see that a lot of times in movies, right? Where like somebody's like, you got to sacrifice your friend to save everybody else, like in Avengers, right? And you see that if you're capable of that, you have very high emotional intelligence that you could sacrifice for yourself, for your others, because you feel like I'll put my emotions aside because I have empathy. All right. I've seen adult people have a temper tantrum in public. Anybody else seen that? Yeah. And so what does it say about their intelligence, if anything, right? Just their intelligence in terms of just like your analytical, your brain intelligence, and then your emotional intelligence, right? And I think that's a great example of if you're having temper tantrums in public, and I have had one or two, by the way. I think they're not common, and they're also I got a lot of I got pushed pretty bad. Like the other person engaged in a temper tantrum with me, right? And anyhow, so yeah, but it's like I always reflect upon that. It's like, no, never again. Don't let that escalate. Don't. There's just no reason to let that. And that's like again emotional intelligence. Navy SEALs actually train for emotional intelligence. They're combat soldiers, right? And but one of the things that separates Navy SEALs from everybody else is they're very intelligent military personnel, because they often are by themselves or in small groups, like very small groups, and they have to make great decisions in order to survive, right? So they use these 4 steps to teach emotional intelligence, right? So in order for more of the candidates to pass the rigid requirements to become a SEAL, the Navy implemented emotional intelligence training. So a 4-step process was taught to the candidates to help them stay in control of their emotions. When one of their teammates is killed or severely injured, or maybe they're being, they're doing things that create emotional situations. You don't want to retaliate because your emotions say revenge, revenge, revenge. So as a result, the pass rate went from 1/4 of the candidates to 1/3. So they actually got more people passing due to implementing this training, right? So 4 things are goal setting, number 1. Number 2 is rehearsal. Number 3 is self-talk. Number 4 is arousal control. All right. So goal setting is you want to set small short-term goals that work towards my larger goals. So I want to graduate from college. For me, I had passed 40 classes that are in my major, and all those will get to me the degree, right? So the big goal is the college degree. The small goal is 30 separate classes, and then you break all those down into smaller short-term goals, right, for each class. And if my goal is to lose 30 pounds, then what I'm going to do this week is to lose 1 pound. And you make that my goal. And then I get to, after 30 weeks, I get to my 30 pound goal, right? So goal setting, I think, is really, really important. It keeps you focused on what you want to do instead of the emotional things that kind of like distract you or push you in other ways, because you're focused on your goals, right? For me, I have a lot of goals. I have goals every day. And then I have weekly goals, monthly goals, annual goals, maybe call that your New Year's resolutions. And I have like life aspiring goals. And then the other thing remember, you shoot from the stars and you land on the moon, you're going to do awesome. I think goals are really, really important because they help you focus on what you need to do instead of worrying about things and having anxiety and then getting overwhelmed. All right. So number 2. So great for your emotional intelligence. because you get paranoid, you get anxiety. Those are all emotions, right? So emotional intelligence is really, really great for handling your nerves and stress. Number two, I do a lot of skiing. Sometimes I like to do super dangerous stuff. People are like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "No, I just have some goals and I control my emotions, and I let my physical body and take over." And I've practiced at it. I'm skilled at it. The other thing I would tell you is don't think too much when you're doing anything kind of dangerous. I notice the more you think about it, the more anxiety you can kind of have. So you just want to sort of go and be prepared. But like waiting around is not good for that. So, all right. But a lot of life forces you to wait, right? The military is just saying, hurry up and wait. So there isn't a rush, and then they just get somewhere and they just have to wait until something happens. So number two is rehearsal. So go over in your mind the nervous situation you're going to be experiencing, being it a job interview or a speech you have to give. And then when you do the challenge, it will be for the second time. So yeah, practice rehearsals, right? Every time you get married, you have a dress rehearsal the night or the 2 nights before the wedding. Everybody knows where to go, where to stand, how it's going to work, and because you don't want to mess up during the wedding ceremony, right? So rehearsal's awesome. So I think that's really, really important to help you handle your emotions, because you just have your brain has some ability to know what to expect, and that makes you feel more comfortable. A lot of us feel more confident if we've done it before, right? Or we've been there before. So, all right. Third, self-talk. So tell yourself you can do it. I really, really do believe in this one. And don't be exaggerator, liar, hyperbole, but be positive and supportive of yourself. Don't let negative thoughts disrupt your confidence, right? So your brain is, again, a double-edged sword. Don't let it cut against you. Use it to cut forward and keep those negative thoughts away. So keep it positive and supportive. You can do this. You can do this. I've done this before. I'm excited about this opportunity. I'm not scared. And then this self-talk will keep you on track to success, right? So figure out, I'm learning to play pickleball, and I'm always reminding myself with these two things, like hit the ball hard, because it's a wiffle ball. So every time you hit the ball hard, it'll get over the net. If you kind of try and hit it soft, because it's a wiffle ball, it doesn't travel far enough, and then it dies. And once it's momentum, it basically falls, because it has holes in the ball and the air travels through it and really slows it down. So, and then number two is always, I'm always reminding myself to hit the ball hard and look at the ball, see the ball. Like if you want to hit it well, you need to look at it completely. Well, boom, right? So see ball, hit ball hard. And I just repeat that myself. And a lot of people are like, wow, have you played pickleball before? No, I'm just learning. I did play tennis growing up as a kid. It was such a bougie game when I was in the 80s and 90s. Then I played a lot of ping pong. I'm not that good at it though, but I can play. So, but I think pickleball is just kind of a good mix of it. So, a great example of just, and then that also again helps you just be focused. So you're not emotional at all, right? Because you're just focused on see ball, hit ball, rather than getting upset or frustrated or that things aren't going your way. I did, by the way, lose I think all 4 singles games the other day, which sometimes I'd be like, but I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm learning. Still. So, and the person I'm playing against is much better than me, right? So that's why I'm like, don't take it very hard that I lost every single game, right? Sometimes that bothers me emotionally, right? Back in the day in any kind of sports. Number 4 is arousal control. So yeah, taking a deep breath will help you reduce the anxiety you might have in a given situation. Cleansing breath is actually a deep intake of air through the nose. Hold it for a moment, and then a long, slow exhale through the mouth. By the way, they do that a lot in yoga. I do a lot of vinyasa, and so that's the cleansing breath is important, because interestingly enough, you get anxiety and emotion during yoga. And I would say a lot of it is I can't do these moves, or I can't hold this pose as long as the instructor or as long as the people in the class around me. Because whether you like it or not, there is that peer pressure influence competition going on, even though you're not trying to compete at all in a yoga class, for example. So it's a great example. Or the wanting to give up, like quit. because you're like, oh, this is hard, this is strenuous, this is like, it's kind of mild suffering sometimes. So it's really good for you. I super believe in yoga. You should, if you don't have a speech topic for your persuasive speech, do persuasive speech on why you need to learn how to do yoga. So all right. So that's the Navy SEAL training that they do for emotional intelligence. Again, just always be set goals and focus on the goal. And then number 2, rehearse. So you have some confidence in what to expect and how you'll deal with the different situations because you've gone through it in your mind a bunch, right? And third is self-talk. Be verbally supportive of yourself. You might even, again, wear, messages on your socks and write it on your shoes, on your hand. Just, I really like that one too. I always tell my daughter ABTTTB, like SB, which it always means it's Michaela Schifrin. She's the world's best skier pretty much right now, an American and lady, and she that acronym means always be faster than the boys. Because as a lady, she noticed if she skied with the boys and could beat them or keep up with most of them, that she was smoking all the ladies in her field. And then arousal control. Again, just cleansing breath. Arousal means just you don't want to be excited or over anxious when you encounter a certain situation, right? You might see that with a dog or a kid who sees that candy and they're like, right? Like no arousal control at all, right? I'm sure most of us can walk into a candy store and be like, yeah, I look at it as kind of the enemy. Costs money, rots your teeth out, and makes you fat, right? So, but candy, I think, is good for when you're in certain situations you really need sugar, right? So, okay. It's good on Halloween too, right? Because that's the holiday for candy, right? So knowledge and literacy, page 236. So technology has actually changed everything when it comes to your knowledge and your literacy. And literacy just isn't like reading literacy, for example, right? You have like financial literacy. Do you understand and know money? Literacy could be over also like, PlayStations. Do you know how to do and make it function, right? And control everything. Because I wouldn't be able to do it if you gave me a PlayStation. I hopefully would turn the power on. And but yeah, I've actually tried to turn some stuff on. I'm like, I can't figure it out, right? So like you realize you gotta have these functional literacy sometimes. Like, can you sit in a Tesla and drive the car? Because it got no keys and like a gear shift. It's just a touch screen and the steering wheel. And a lot of people, I know my parents, they were super like, what the we didn't even know what to do for like 5 minutes. We were looking at it, talking to each other, like, and I was like, yeah, there are no keys, like that's, I was sitting in the back with my phone, and the phone unlocks the car for you. And so it's just, they were like, and then it starts, but if you didn't realize the car opens the door automatically and starts with your phone in it when you go in the car, but the car is an electrical engine, so it doesn't really make any noise. So they didn't even realize it was actually on either. And so that was that they were really, because but it also makes sense because when you're literate, you've been doing any kind of combustion engine car for a long time with keys, and you're just used to the ignition and putting from park into gear, right? There's a whole startup process for every car you've driven for the last 70 years of your life, because they're pretty old. And you realize that this just totally changed it, right? So, okay. So more like a phone than a car. All right. So touchscreen. All right. So functional literacy. Again, this is the ability to operate within the demands of our environment. So whatever environment you are, this is your functional literacy, so that you can actually like operate in it. Functional literacy means that we can balance a checkbook, fill out a job application, prepare an income tax form, figure out a home budget, relate to others. It is the source of information over we have the most control, right? What do you want to be functionally literate in, right? Can you do karaoke? Can you write a little code? Are you functionally literate on, the different sports fields? Like you can play volleyball, you can play soccer, play baseball, softball, or you can play basketball, or you can play hockey or ice hockey, right? So what are all your different functional literacies? Because you can be in all these places, and a lot of times you're seeing that also you can function, right? And means that you work in whatever environment that you're in, right? Okay, so media literacy is the ability to manage what we watch, read, and listen to, right? So for entertainment, for news, could be YouTube, TikTok, and the media has become an important part of our daily lives. Media literacy is the ability to apply critical thinking skills to the media. Should I believe this? Is it a reliable source? what's going on. I would give you a good example of Fox News just fired Tucker Carlson last night. He was their main guy, took over for Bill O'Reilly in 2016. And it's all of a fallout from this lawsuit that they're being sued for lying, that the media, as a media agency, they were telling things they knew not to be true over and over and over, mostly because they saw that their viewers would leave them if they said a message that their viewers didn't like, right? So if you are, and so there's an argument that a Fox viewer is not media literate, right? Because they use it and consume it, but there's no critical thinking going on. So, right, so they're more like a sheep, or a person in an echo chamber, right? So and I heard Vladimir Putin has no phone, no connection to the internet, and the only thing he knows about the world is from his like 4 advisors and himself. And he doesn't talk to people, and you can't meet him unless you do a 2-week quarantine. So, like, because he doesn't want to get COVID or any other thing to get sick. So, I think we talked about this the other day, because they had one of his bodyguards defected, and they did an interview. And he talked about what he was like. They're like, yeah, that's kind of confirms some things we knew, but like really interesting, very insightful, right? Because he had a lot of inner knowledge in the inner circle. So again, like your sight is further than other people's sight, right? Okay. I check out all the sources, by the way. I watch some Fox News, some MSNBC, CNN, BBC, even a little Al Jazeera, Vice, Christian Science Monitor, and then I have 6 or 7 newspaper subscriptions from across the United States. So I get a lot, even though they're kind of owned by a lot of the same companies, but yeah, getting lots of information from lots of different sources. I just think that's the way to do it, right? Just like if I'm trying to get investment research, I'm always looking for lots of research, lots of opinions, not just one opinion that I favor, right? So that's a good example for when you're doing like research for like financial investments or maybe into cryptocurrency, right? Being media literate is really, really important, because you want to make sure you have good knowledge and research you're going to base your financial decisions on. So, by the way, AI seems to be the new thing over crypto. Invest in AI to make your money. So I did see them last time I looked, the millennial millionaires, the #1 way they became millionaires in that generation was cryptocurrency. So yeah, I think now it's too late. It's like the gold rush. Everybody already showed up in California and dug up all the gold, and now you're showing up trying to do what they did to be successful, right? Yeah, right. So all right. Now, the Center for Media Literacy has many experts who suggest a variety of questions that we can ask as we watch different messages on the variety of medias that are available. All right. So, in no particular order, here are some of the questions you might want to consider. I'm watching, this Fox News clip, then I'm watching CNBC, then I'm watching, ABC News, then Al Jazeera. They have really, really different perspectives, which I think is super cool. And then, so you ask, who's the media intended for? Like, who's their target audience when they made this ad or made this campaign commercial, or they made this news piece, right? Like men, women, what religion, how old, what race, what economic group. You can see, try and figure out who is this media actually intended for. Now, like when you watch a Tesla commercial, like think about who's this target, is who's this intended for, this Tesla ad, right? Because you see that like if I looked at the research real quickly, like what's your average Tesla owner like? I'm sure it's something that a lot of people would say those are successful people, right? And that's why I think the brand of Tesla and those things have been connected. So, who wants to reach this audience? So who's making this advertisement, for example, or this media show, and why? So who did it and why are they doing it? To gain favor, to make money, and then for example, if you're doing a murder investigation, motive is really, really important. Motive helps you figure out who the killer might be, right? Does anybody here have a reason to want to have this person dead, right? And that helps you eliminate a lot of targets. So third is, whose perspective is this story told? From the victim, from the conqueror, the winner, just the police officers. It could be, again, I think in America, we generally say we should let both people tell their side of the story, right? Like in the Paltrow trial, there was Dr. Sanderson who was suing Gwyneth Paltrow, and then Gwyneth Paltrow took the stand to defend herself. And you got to hear both sides of the story, right? Doesn't help that much, but in America, it's fair. That's what's important, right? And we talked a lot about in life, if people are upset, allow them to give their perspective. It's important. A lot of people feel better if they get to verbally express how they feel about something. All right, even if it doesn't really, it's like getting it out is therapeutic, and therefore then they don't have to act on it, right? Again, so that matters a lot. Whose perspective is, if you see the Warriors Sacramento Kings game on Wednesday, after the game is over, right? One side's going to be happy, and one side's going to be super mad and sad. And it's like, well, is this story a great story or a terrible story? It depends on your perspective, right? If you're on the winning team or the losing team, and then whose voices are heard and whose voices are absent. So that's really, really important too, right? Because you see that again, you get only one side of the story, or there's 4 or 5 people who saw what happened, but you only hear the one person's perspective, right? You need to hear all of them. So whose voices are heard and then whose voices are absent and not available. And that would be really, really, really relevant, right? To have their voice there. But that's why some people, they don't, people don't like to snitch, and they don't want to, even though they saw something or heard something, they often don't want to, get involved with that. So you realize their voice is absent. But that's just, sometimes you can't fix that, right? So, and then finally, what strategies does this message use to get my attention and make me feel included? You remember the hidden persuaders thing, where the Pepsi can was looking like Superman and this red, white, and blue, and the cape, right? There's these interesting connections and illusions, or you might see, sorry. And I also want to say that inclusion is really, really important, right? Everybody wants to feel included. If you make someone in the audience feel excluded, they're immediately going to be hurt. And when people are emotionally hurt, they often leave or don't want to participate, or they don't like you anymore, right? So I would really, really talk about what strategies are used to make you feel included or excluded, right? So I might give a great example is, let's say we're in a meeting and I'm introducing myself, and I'd say, how many of us play video games, right? And I know almost everybody will raise their hand, so everybody feels included, right? And if a couple people don't, then I'm like, how many of us like Chick-fil-A? You see, I just didn't get to the point where everybody's raised their hand, so at some point, so everybody feels included. Nobody's been left out. Or when you have food or gifts for people, everybody gets it, so nobody's left out or excluded, right? I'm really big about that, which is why I don't like discrimination against people, because when you discriminate against a group of people, you make them feel excluded, right? By race, by gender, by sexual orientation, could be by age, could be an economic group, could be religion, right? So I'm very, very inclusive, and it's more that it's just excluding hurts people's feelings. And I've learned that. I was one of the first things I really understood about myself when I was a kid growing up. Like, people would be picking teams, and I remember, if you're the Asian kid, they kind of didn't pick you for sports. They kind of assumed you weren't very good, right? But I would get in the math class that people would ask if I would tutor them, right? And you see, it's really interesting. You see these things that happen to you, and they affect the way you understand the world. Okay, so the strategies that are used, right, by this message that get my attention could be sexual appeal too, as well. That's used a lot, and 1/3 of all advertisements have explicit sexual appeal. The other third has implicit sexual appeal, and then the final third is asexual. So inclusion. All right. Who profits from this presentation and who loses? So who are the winners and losers in this presentation? So that's always important to understand. And then who created this message? A lot of times if you can't figure out who created it, that shouldn't be hidden. Think about if you publish something, you want credit for that in the world. So if people put out messages that you can't figure out who it's from, and there's no credit to be able to give it. I'm thinking it's a false message, right? It's a propaganda. You think about how most of us naturally, we want credit for something that gets viral or it gets popular, right? And then what techniques are used to attract my attention? the design of the ad. Has anybody noticed a lot of commercials have singing in them, right? State, nationwide, among your or something, and jingles. They did research. I think the first one, it was like mycreditscore.com, and they found that jingles stick in people's head after you see the commercial, like all damn day, right? And so there's lots of that. They also noticed that, you know, sexual appeal works again. Maybe again, celebrity affiliation. So hiring someone to do a celebrity to be the spokesperson for your company, right? And you're looking at all the different, again, things. Just watch any ad and you can see, you know, what techniques are used. Again, they also make Photoshop people so they look skinnier and more beautiful than they really are, right? So, and then how much different people understand this message differently from me. That one's a really interesting one, right? Because again, it comes to reality testing. When I see a makeup commercial, I totally have no interest. But if a lady watched it, she might have a lot of interest, or anybody who's interested in makeup, right? You just see that people perceive these messages differently. We watch, I watch a show like Stranger Things. I want to call it Darker Things because it's pretty dark. Because my 11-year-old daughter was like, "Well, can I watch with you?" I was like, it's pretty. Some of it's pretty like might give you nightmares and stuff. You know, you don't want nightmares. They don't do anything good for you, by the way, right? So that's why I'm trying to protect my child from them. So again, it's just like, how do you look at this message, how do people perceive it differently? And that gives you a lot of perspective and insight. By the way, the jingle thing totally works because my kids can sing a bunch of the jingles they've heard on TV commercials, like O'Reilly Auto Parts. They can just it's crazy. And then when they see it on the store when we drive by anywhere, they're like O'Reilly, and I'm always like, oh my god, you just see how effective these advertising techniques are. So what lifestyles, values, and points of view are represented in or omitted, are missing from this message, right? So that's why a lot of TV shows want to be inclusive and have a diverse cast, and have different, again, a variety of lifestyles, a variety of values, and a variety of points of view are represented, right? And I think that's a really rich message if you can pull that off, by the way, right? So it's like you see people react to, rare and unique things that happen in the world. Could be super tragic too, by the way, right? And you see all the different people who have different values and different points of view and different lifestyles and how they interpret what just happened, right? And some of your current events, if you remember way back, we did that assignment back then, but like you can see, like can someone tell me, for example, if you're listening, something happened in Coachella with Frank Ocean, who I'm actually not even familiar with, I'm sorry. But like, it's like, is that a good thing, a bad thing? People were defending him, other people were upset. I think he didn't play a set or something. So, and you kind of see that all the different people and have different reactions to that, right? So, and then why was this message sent? Again, just the purpose of it. Is it to persuade? Is it to entertain? Is it to misinform and trick me? Is it to the NFL draft is coming up on Friday and this weekend? It's like there's all kinds of messages sent out, and the NFL people say they're all lies because everybody is keeping it close to the vest about what they will do in the NFL draft, right? Because it's competitive and people will like covet the player you want and try to and move ahead of you to steal him, or not, right? So it's business competition. So yeah, so you just think about any message sent pretty much about the NFL draft this week. You got to think about why was it sent, because it's to misinform, to mislead a lot, mostly, right? It's because nobody wants to actually reveal what they're doing. Even the team that's picking first hasn't told anybody who they're going to pick first, because usually they can say it because they know what they're going to do, right? But then maybe they can trade. There's a trading that can happen, so they're going to keep it secret for a while until they have to do it, right? So, all right. So then, information and reference literacy. This again is the functional skill when it comes to understanding references and like sources and the information. And then we learned about what sources you could trust, from .org, .coms to .govs, .edus, and then the different fact check groups that give you an idea of what a kind of reference literacy you should have. And for example, in my life experience, I've learned who the conservative sources are. There's a bunch of them, right? Forbes, the National Review. For groups and think tanks, you have Heritage Foundation, American Enterprise Institute, and then the James Brady Center for Gun Violence is a gun control group. March for Our Lives, gun control group. Habitat for Humanity, like, building homes, and you learn all like what they are about and what kind of messaging they give out, whether it's political or anything else, and then you get it all kind of stored in your mind, and it changes over time. But there you go. And then BBC.com, by the way, is considered as the world's most legitimate news source, and because they used to say, the quote is, the sun never sets on the British Empire. So their BBC covers the news all over the planet, because what happened in India or Australia to Ireland to all of Europe to the Americas, I mean, we used to be their colony, right, affected them. Captain Cook, British guy, discovered Hawaii, right? So and Formosa, which is now known as Taiwan, formerly as a European. So because the locals knew it was there, the islands were there. So but you see that all of that fits into just your functional information or reference literacy, right? You understand that where all these things come from and who can be trusted. And the BBC, by the way, also the reason they are so considered trustworthy is during World War II, when the Nazis were doing the Blitzkrieg on London, and it looked like they were going to win and invade and defeat England after they conquered France and Norway and everybody else in Poland, and is that the BBC was telling the British people what was going on, and the British government, including Prime Minister Winston Churchill, told them to shut the F up. You're hurting morale. And the BBC said they had this, famous message about like, we will tell the news as it is, and the truth. So that's why they have this reputation for always telling accurate global news. It comes during World War II, the government tried to censor them, right? Like, you can't say anything what's going on with the Nazis and how they're winning so far, right? And they were like, no, we have to tell the truth, and everybody should know what's going on. So, okay. Cultural literacy. And by the way, I know this is true today, by the way, because if you ever meet soldiers, they will tell you that a lot of times they listen to BBC for the most accurate news of what's going on, because they don't, when you're in a war zone, you only know what's going on in front of you. And you kind of wonder what the big picture is sometimes, right? So you'll hear American soldiers in combat listen to BBC a lot to try and get big picture news as much as they can. So cultural literacy. Do you know the various cultures? Remember, cultures are not just your national heritage. Could be, I'm a gamer culture, I have a like a barbecue culture, I have their music culture, video game, there are billions of them, right? I do cross stitching, I am into landscaping culture, permaculture, right? I'm an agriculturalist, cultural farmer. So schemas, these are kind of the way, like a schematic, it's kind of a plan or design for something. So you'll find that people who are culturally literate, they can kind of, a lot of times you have social skills if you can do this. You can navigate all the different cultural situations and fit in and be function, right? And not embarrass yourself or do something really, really wrong. And schemas help you fit into that, because there's a certain way you should act when you're in the different cultural groups, right? So if you're a new person in a different culture, I often say stay silent a little bit and observe, and you can kind of figure out how and who and how it works, and then fit in a lot better than kind of just disrupting it and trying to make your presence known, right? So and there's schemas for everything, right? For example, what's our schema for answering the phone? You pick up the phone, you say hello, right? And then because in other cultures the schemas are different. I remember in Germany, it's been 24 years since I lived there, but when you answer the phone there, and this is before mobile, it was the landline in your house, you say your last name. So I would answer the phone and say Lee, and the other person would say their last name, and that's how you've identified yourself, like who's talking. And so you see the schemas are just different right? Like anybody eat in a French restaurant, the salad comes last, not at the beginning. In American schema in a restaurant, salad's always in the beginning, with appetizers. It's up front before you get to your main entree, right? So you just don't get cultural literacy. You walk into the different cultural restaurant situations, and you know how the order of how things go, and you can fit in because of the schema, right? Think about the schema at a movie theater. You buy your ticket, you get your popcorn, you get in line to go in the theater, you choose a seat, and then when the movie's over, everyone kind of exits out, right? There's kind of a plan or design that everyone knows and follows, and that way they all live culturally literate in a movie theater in America, right? And they kind of know how to get in and out and not kind of, like tourists often don't know how to function where in these places because they're tourists. They don't belong there, or sorry, they're not from there, right? And so you often see that they don't know how to fit in. And so one of the things I would do as a tourist is always try to be culturally literate because I'm going to that culture, I'm visiting it, and I figure out, what to say, how to fit in a little bit better. And I noticed that the people who in the culture really appreciate that, right? Because you're not acting like an ignorant tourist. All right, so thinking versus intelligence. They are different. So one is the application of intelligence, thinking. The latter is a perception of that person, right? So just because I am smart doesn't mean I think smart all the time, right? So you're an intelligent person. Thinkers, though, actually are applying their intelligence constantly, right? So thinkers are constantly applying their intelligence. And I think students who learn in a class and then apply what they learn through their assignments, those are the ones you're always most impressed with as an instructor. Because you're like, okay, I understand that I can tell that they have actually learned the material and they're actually doing it. They actually have applied it. Like I'll give everyone feedback on their outlines, on your speeches, and then I see this student do the next assignment and they do the same things I said, fix those. That I'm like, doesn't reflect well on intelligence and doesn't reflect very poorly on thinking because you're not applying the intelligence at all, right? So and so as a student, I would make sure I don't fall into that pattern. And I which is why students who really are like, I want feedback, that's great. By the way, you should give yourself though self-feedback, self-evaluation constantly. That's one of the things I want you to take away from this class is use the critique sheet that I use to grade your speeches and if you just kind of look at it, you kind of memorize it because it makes sense. And every time you speak, you kind of go through this checklist, like, how did I do? Eye contact? How's my organization? Did I gesture? Did I move around? How did I use my voice? Did I have evidence and facts and statistics? And did I verbally cite my sources? And how was my ethos, my pathos, and my logos? And was I funny and relevant? And did I connect with my audience? Did I have great visual aids? Maybe even a real functional like a three-dimensional, like here's some scissors, right? So, okay. And then patterns in thinking. So we have the emotional thinking process. This occurs when you make a decision based on sympathy, passion, or prejudice. These can be good or bad. This pattern of thinking stresses the heart over the mind and is dominated by one's emotions. The motto of these people is, if it feels good, do it. And then in this pattern of thinking, decisions are arrived at using emotional criteria, not kind of any kind of logical criteria, right? So because the logical criteria might tell you that these costs are really bad, don't do it. But the emotional criteria is like, donuts are awesome, like Homer Simpson says, and I'm going to eat them, like more than one, right? And that's a great example of the emotional thinking process. And it can be really based on prejudice. I'm not going to rent the house to these people. I don't like them. That's prejudice. Passion could be just people who are upset and they'll kind of be angry and then they'll be angry towards everybody around them for a little bit, right, too. And then sympathy, which is, I'm going to make this decision. I only have $20 and I'm hungry, but I'm going to give you $10 because you're a homeless lady and I sympathize with that. Right. I don't empathize with it because I'm a man and I'm not homeless. So I can't really empathize, but I can sympathize with her. Right. And you make an emotional decision. But the other day I gave someone a ride, a hitchhiker, and then I got some good karma came my way later that day too. And I remember thinking like, yeah, maybe that does happen too. You do something nice and some favor just falls in your lap later on. It's like, cool. But that it's an emotional thinking process, right? When you're doing things without logic, again, based on sympathy, passion, or prejudice. Try not to be an emotional thinker. And I struggle with this because in my personal relationship with the lady, I can be not emotional enough. Like positive emotions and be more talk about it and stuff. So guys, we have a harder time with that. So, all right, the logical thinking process. So it's kind of the opposite of emotional thinking process. Happens when you make decisions because the facts of the situation dictate or justify the decision you're using. This pattern of thinking attempts to ignore emotional considerations and favor one's ability to use reason. The stresses that humans dominate other species because of their ability to reason. Therefore, decisions should be made first on logical criteria. Right? You decide things based on financials 100%, right? What you can afford and not afford. People make emotional decisions, they get big credit card debt. Logical thinkers, they're controlling their finances and not letting their emotions let them accumulate things they don't really need, right, in the end, and then having huge debt as a result. So again, you're ignoring your emotional considerations here, right? So, and this is, remember, this is what separates us from every species on the planet, is our logical thinking process. Lots of species on this planet do emotional things. They cannot be logical thinkers. So I'm like, be a human being, because then what I mean by that is that what separates us from everybody else on the planet, everything on the planet, is that we have this logical thinking process. We can engage in it that very only certain other humans can, right? And that's what makes us unique and superior. So use it, right? And then finally, the vertical thinking process, actually, as opposed to horizontally. So not finally, but third, the vertical thinking process. This is where you use a step-by-step, step-by-step vertical procedure to make decisions. You cannot go to step 2 unless you have first completed step 1. Step 3 is dependent on steps 1 and 2. The vertical thinker, also known as a linear thinker, is dependent on clearly written and organized instructions to get a task accomplished. So my Canvas instructions, for example, should be clear and organized. And this is the way recipes are followed, right? Or the methods computers think. Then a vertical thinker, right, code just follows every step and has infinite computations to do. By the way, AI can process, like, oh man, I heard the number. It was like 8 million times faster per second than the human brain, because it has so many, Google or Microsoft has so many servers going. And so that's just to show you how quicker it is than the human brain in terms of to make computations. And even though our brain has the knowledge, right? So if an instruction is missed or an error is made, work on the task comes to a halt until the error is corrected, because it's linear, right? So if like step 5 breaks, they got to stop the process until it's fixed. And then again, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, right? And the pattern stresses conventional rather than unique or creative outcomes, because it's very linear, right? And computers tend to be not as unique or creative in the sense that they're conventional, right? It's great at doing math, for example. Just, have you ever seen a human computer before computers were invented, technological machines? They were mathematicians, right? So NASA had computers. The computing department was a bunch of people who were called computers, and they were good at computing mathematical equations, right? How to like launch angles and stuff like that. So the horizontal thinking process, sideways instead of vertical, sideways. It's more creative, unconventional, highly innovative, uses off-the-wall ideas. It's popularized by Edward de Bono. This type of thinking or processing information stresses creativity. So decision, your workplace might be very creative in art and games, and bean bags and stuff instead of like furniture desks. Decisions are based on one's ability to select from a wide variety of choices developed from many angles and approaches to the situation. Some things allow you to do that, to be very horizontal in what you're going to decide. Other things you're kind of, it's hard to have that many perspectives. Like, if you ever tried to decide what color you want to paint something, like the inside of your house, you go the horizontal thinking process, and you might have a hard time making a decision because there's so many creative different things you could choose from. Whereas you can kind of go with, like, oh, the last house we did this, we liked it. Okay, let's just choose that color again, right? So the bonus 6 hats of thinking is actually page 241. He has the white, red hat, black one, the yellow, green, and blue hats of thinking. You're not going to get a test ticket on this, but you can, if you really want to dive into it, it's on page 241. So I'm going to skip over this. So it's going to wrap up the chapter. It's about the critical thinking process. If you remember, critical thinking is a skill. It can be learned. No one approaches works all the time. No one approach works all the time. So be flexible, open-minded about what critical thinking process fits. Should you be authoritarian, democratic, laissez-faire? Think about our thinking process. Right? It's very metaphysical to do that. And the focus of this chapter is, in this chapter, I wanted to look at intelligence, thinking, literacy. Remember, that's like functional literacy and all the different environments you could be in. And then how these interact with each other to make us smart. And there is difference between thinking and intelligence. Intelligence seems to be based on how our brains are wired. Different kinds of intelligence suggest that are different types of wiring out there, right? Thinking is the skill and how we use our intellectual wiring. So a lot of it is, don't be involuntary, don't react. Think about what you want. And I constantly stress this to my children, right? When they're offered things, they just instantly react. I'm like, you should think about this for a second, like, and make a little more careful decision, right? And then I point out afterwards to my children a lot, like what happened. Like we went to Panda Express the other day and she ordered something and I said, are you sure you want this? And she's like, yeah. And then I pointed out some things. She's like the price, like you get a lot more if you just order this. And she's like, oh, I want that. And I was like, yeah, right. So don't just react, think and make a good, smart decision. And remember, it's a skill. We can all improve our ability at critical thinking. So no matter what our initial intelligence suggests, we can improve our critical thinking. So I look for situations where I can work and improve on my critical thinking, right? Because the more you exercise it, the more you work on it, the better you get, right? And that's like any skill. The more time and effort you put into it, then you actually get results. If you don't put any time and effort into it, you're not going to get better at it. Math is the same way. If you want to get good at math, it is not based on your brain. I'm pretty convinced it's about studying math because you have to study like a couple hours, I think, every day for like K-12 to be good at math. That's a lot. A lot of people don't want to do that, right? So, but math is a skill to me. It's not some like musical talent type thing or dance talent thing, right? Those are things I think some people can't dance, other people can, right? But like math, we can all learn because it's a skill. If you want it, like any skill, you need to put the time and effort in. Being smart is not just a high intelligence score. Being smart occurs when you effectively combine your intelligence with your knowledge and guide them with your thinking skills. This is the end. Thanks for making it through the end of the textbook lecture.